RFK is bringing back the 6 car and will run in the Daytona 500 with David Reagan, and NASCAR has announced a new media rights deal. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start talking about Kimberly Clark, as it was announced on Tuesday that Kimberly Clark will return to sponsor Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in 2024. All the companies and brands that are part of the Kimberly Clark Association will once again continue working with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in the 2024 season. I think this is really awesome. I'm glad to see that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has a lot of loyal sponsors that will work with them once again in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Monster Energy. As it was reported by Jenna Fryer, I believe it was, and on multiple other reporters on Tuesday, that McLaren has signed Monster Energy to a multi-year deal. From what I remember correctly, Monster Energy have been sponsoring Lewis Hamilton, so it's kind of unclear if they're still going to be working with Lewis Hamilton or not. But you look what McLaren's been able to accomplish on picking up new sponsors and brands. They've brought a lot of new companies in. They've gotten Dell. I think Lenovo's part of their team as well, and DeWalt also joined in the last few years as well. McLaren's a very recognizable brand, and it's awesome and glad to see that we're going to see Monster Energy continue working with a new company starting in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Nashcar. Now, last night, Adam Stern put out a tweet because Nashcar has released some new merchandise to commemorate this week's award ceremony banquet that was taking place at Nashville. I have to say that this stuff actually looks really interesting. I do like it quite a bit. It's not the best merchandise I've ever seen in the world. I think some of the other stuff from Starter that's supposed to release, those jackets especially, looks a lot better. But I think this Nashcar stuff does look solid in my opinion. I think it does look okay. It could be better for sure, but it does look solid and decent in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about 23XI Racing. As 23XI Racing has made some changes, and the biggest change they're making is they have a new logo. They've had their old logo for the last few years, and they're changing it for the 4th year. Now, obviously, 23XI Racing is planning to move into a new shop in the coming months and coming years. Obviously, they're going to be moving to the shop in Huntersville, and the goal long term for 23XI Racing is to expand. Honestly, I like the logo quite a bit. I think it's kind of interesting. It looks a little sleek if you ask me. I still like the old logo a lot more, but I still do like this new logo, and I think it's overall pretty solid. So it's cool to see that 23XI Racing is going to have a rebrand, and I think this looks overall pretty solid in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Daytona 500. As it was confirmed on Tuesday early afternoon, the Daytona 500 has been sold out with its grandstands and camping. This is the earliest in recent memory that the Daytona 500 has sold out, and it shows that the sport is not dying. In fact, it is growing in some essences. Like I said, this is the early sellout. I think in the last 9 or 10 years, you look back to previous years, I think the Daytona 500 sold out like a week before last year, I think in early February. So for the Daytona 500 sellout, and we're not basically even in December, well, actually we are now in December, but even before December, I think is an absolutely incredible and amazing accomplishment for the sport. I'm really happy about this, and I'm very glad to see the Daytona 500 has sold out. You'll just have to now wait until 2025 unless you get your renewals. You'll have to wait until 2025 if you're going to have a chance and an opportunity to go to the Daytona 500. Nonetheless, this is really exciting, really awesome stuff, and very happy to see the Daytona 500 for 2024 has officially sold out. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kern County. As it was announced on Wednesday that Kern County has been renamed Kevin Harvick's Kern Raceway. Kevin Harvick, of course, is from Bakersfield, California, which is where Kern County is located. And it's really cool to see that Kevin Harvick is going to be getting involved. I think he's going to be working as an advisor for the racetrack in 2024 and helping trying to restore and bring the track back to its natural and former glory. I think this is really awesome. I love that Kevin Harvick is giving back to the communities, trying to help out Kern County, and trying to bring back the racetrack to its former glory. The track's been a little bit of turmoil and trouble, so to see Kevin Harvick coming in and trying to help that racetrack out, I think it's exciting. We've seen other drivers getting involved with their hometown racetracks. I think Kyle Larson's been getting involved in a couple racetracks in the last few years, so I think it's just really exciting and really awesome to see that Kevin Harvick is getting involved and trying to fix Kern County. Really awesome and great stuff overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the SRX. As this morning, the SRX put out a tweet in regards to what their plans are for 2024. Now, the SRX already announced 4 racetracks for 2024, but they're still planning to run 2 dirt races in 2024. And according to Don Hawk, who spoke at a seminar earlier this week, according to him, they could be headed to Canada in 2024. Now, where could the SRX potentially race? Well, there's one track in particular I've seen some people thinking, and that is Ohsweken Speedway. Ohsweken Speedway is a track that's been around for a very, very long time, and obviously we know the SRX has been interested in wanting to expand outside of the United States. There was a report that came out about a year ago, I should say, that they were talking about and had discussions about maybe going to Saudi Arabia in the future or going internationally. And this would be the first step to going into that international sphere for the SRX. It'd be really cool to see him go to like Ohsweken Speedway. Ohsweken's like a historic racetrack. The NASCAR Canada Series has raced there quite a bit. And I think it's just really awesome and great to see that the SRX is talking about going to Canada. The big question I have is what is that other dirt track they're going to use? I'd have to imagine Eldora is most likely the front runner to get that second day, but I would love to see a track like I-55 Speedway get another opportunity and shot to host another race. I live really close to the racetrack. It is my home racetrack, and I unfortunately was not able to go there in 2022 when they raced there. I would love for them to make a return to I-55 Speedway in 2024, but if I had to guess what likely will be the dirt track that comes back that's other than the Canada race, I'd have to imagine it's going to be Eldora, considering Tony Stewart owns the track. I'd imagine that is most likely the track that we would go. So we'll see what happens in regards to that, but nonetheless, it's good to see that the SRX will be expanding to Canada more likely in 2024. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about most popular drivers. Every single year since like 1959 or 1960, NASCAR has had the most popular driver award. And they announced the Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series most popular driver award. For the Cup Series, no surprise here, it is Chase Elliott. For the Xfinity Series, it's Justin Allgaier. And for the Truck Series, it's Hailie Deegan. Let's go through all series. Kyle Busch, I think, had a really good chance and opportunity. I know Kyle Larson had a shot, Chastain had a shot, and Ryan Blaney had a shot to win the most popular driver award. But let's be realistic here. Chase Elliott has a massive fan base. It's not just the Bill Elliott fans. You got the Dale Jr. fans who went to become huge fans of Chase Elliott, so that does not surprise me. Xfinity is the only one that really shocks me if you had to ask me. I really thought that with Josh Berry taking over for Kevin Harvick in 2024 and him making select Cup starts this year, I would have thought maybe he'd win the most popular driver award, but Justin Allgaier's got a lot of loyal fans. I'm also a big fan of Justin Allgaier myself, so it's really good to see Justin Allgaier get it done. And Hailie Deegan, it's really cool to see her go out and win another award. Obviously, it would have been cool to see a guy like Matt DiBenedetto get it done, or maybe even Stuart Freeze. I think Carson Nosbar was involved in the top 5 as well, and Ben Rhodes was too. But realistically, Hailie Deegan has a massive fan base, so it doesn't surprise or shock me to see her actually win the most popular driver award over the driver. So I would have been really cool to see a driver like Matt DiBenedetto go out there and win it. So nonetheless, it's really awesome, and I'm really glad to see that those drivers have won the most popular driver award, and congratulations to all 3 on winning the award. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kurt Busch. Now, Kurt Busch at last night's award ceremony was introduced, according to Bob Podcast, by Daniel Cowboy Cerrone in basically introducing Kurt Busch. Basically with all of them trying to basically represent and give a lot of support to Kurt and basically remember what Kurt Busch has accomplished in the sport. Obviously, Kurt Busch announced at Daytona, and he got a standing ovation, of course, when that happened, but Kurt Busch received a standing ovation from a lot of people in the industry. Obviously, Kurt, like I said, announced Daytona that he would be retiring from racing as he has not been medically cleared at this particular moment and point to be coming back. It is a shame to see that Kurt Busch is not going to be in the Cup Series anymore, at least on a full-time basis. Maybe long-term he does come back on a part-time basis if he does end up feeling better. At least we are going to see Kurt Busch still involved in the sport in 2024, working with 2311 Racing, trying to build that program up more than they've already had this year. But it is really sad to see that Kurt Busch is retired now. You know, it feels like it's kind of the end for Kurt, and it's really sad to hear. And I wish that Kurt was medically cleared and he could get racing, which Kurt has said once he does get medically cleared, he'll kind of figure out what he wants to do in the future, but he'll still be working with 2311 Racing in 2024, which I think is a massive positive if you ask me. So we'll see what happens long-term in the future in regards to that, but still, it's sad to see that Kurt Busch, at least at this point, looks like will not be returning in the near future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course, as the 2024 layout has been officially revealed for the Chicago Street Course. And if you look at the layout, it's basically the same layout as they had in 2023. It does not shock or surprise me to say the layout is going to be staying relatively the same in 2024, as obviously I think the race in 2023 was very, very entertaining from this year. You had some solid racing, a lot of side-by-side happening throughout the pack in the field, and I think it was just overall a pretty good race. Now, I will say the weather played a big role in making the race as good as it was. Had the rain not been there, I don't think the race would have been great. You go back to the Xfinity Series race that happened where Cole Custer completely dominated, I think led every single lap of the event. There was not a lot of passing on the racetrack, but the track is definitely racy for sure, so there will be opportunities and chances to make passes throughout the field in 2024. The agreement sounds like it's been finalized at this point, and the fact that they're continuing to release the layouts and continue to release race links tells you that this track is going to be back for 2024. A big question will be is, will the Chicago Street Course be back after the 2024 season? That is something to be determined at this particular moment and at this particular point. Nonetheless, I'm glad to see that they've made some movement with the Street Course. Not much changes going on, but glad to see the Street Course will at least be back for 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Max Verstappen. There was an article that came out, I think, from Forbes and Adam Stern, and according to Max, he says he'll retire from F1 sooner if the series focuses too much on entertainment. Definitely. There's so much more things out there anyway. You know, it's not only about F1 in life. This is something that's been kind of continuing through the course of the last 2 weeks. You go back to Las Vegas, where Max Verstappen was extremely frustrated with how F1 was doing things in Las Vegas. He wants to be more focused on the racing. He says the show is definitely important for sure, but F1 is so focused on the show, and he basically said that the race at Vegas was 99% show and 1% race. And I do have to agree with Max Verstappen to a pretty big extent. Look, Max Verstappen is a driver that just wants to go and race. And you look at Max Verstappen and everything he's accomplished in Formula One. I believe Max Verstappen has 54 career F1 victories, which is now third on the all-times wins list. He's a 3-time champion, 3 championships in a row, by the way. And Max Verstappen is likely going to be the winningest driver in F1. I do believe Max Verstappen will go through his contract in F1, which goes through 2028, which is 5 years from now. But then I think there's a good chance possibly he's going to retire from Formula One and go do something else. And the thing is, he can retire right now from F1 if he wants to and go race in a different sport like NASCAR perhaps. Maybe race in the World Endurance Championship, do some rally racing perhaps. Maybe go to IndyCar perhaps and race there. I think it would be much better for him. I think he would have a lot more fun in that series than racing in F1. And if he did decide to do that, I personally would not blame him at all. So we'll see what happens long-term in regards to Max Verstappen's future, but it sounds like at this point in moment that he may retire a lot sooner if NASCAR does not stop doing a lot of the gimmicks and the things they have been doing. Well, F1, I should say, would stop doing all the gimmicks that they have been doing. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Richard Childress Racing. As they announced on Wednesday morning, they have announced some new key competition leadership appointments for 2024. Andy Petrie, I believe, was the competition director. It's been promoted to the executive vice president. Justin Alexander will be the competition director starting in 2024. And Eric Komanek will be the technical director of RCR starting in 2024. Look, Richard Childress Racing had to make some really big changes with everything going on at RCR. There's been a lot of tension going on over the course of the year. They started the year off in 2023 on a really good note. Kyle Busch got 3 wins, and Austin Hill won 4 of the first 15 or 16 races, but then I think he didn't win a race the rest of the 2023 season. Kyle Busch won, like I said, 3 races in the first 15 weeks, and then he didn't go on to win another race the rest of the year, and unfortunately got eliminated in the round of 12 after being a championship threat at the start of the season. They had to make some massive and big changes in the organization if they're long-term going to succeed. So it's not a surprise to see that they are making movement. And I think Andy Petrie getting promoted to the executive vice president role, I think is really huge for the team. He's been a big reason why this team has gotten a lot better over the course of the last few years. But I think him moving into a higher up position is really good. Anything about Richard Childress is not getting any younger. I believe he's 78 years old. And he'll be not much longer before we see him retire from being owner, and probably Andy Petrie or maybe even Austin Dillon perhaps taking over the ownership side of things, and even Mike Dillon as well coming in and leading the group as the owner of the team. So we'll see what happens long term in regards to that. But nonetheless, it's interesting to see that Richard Childress is making some big moves to try to help the organization and see if that can help the team going forward into the future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jason Burdett. As it was reported by TobyChristie.com that Jason Burdett will not return to Junior Motorsports in 2024. Jason Burdett has been a crew chief at Junior Motorsports, I believe, since 2015 or 2016. He worked with Justin Allgaier from 2016 up to 2022. And then he worked with Brandon Jones for 1 year in 2023. I wonder if Brandon Jones played a major role and a major reason why Jason Burdett is not returning in the first place. And if that's the case, that is a really big shame. Now, could Jason Burdett go and work with another team? It's certainly possible. There are some drivers that have not announced their crew chiefs for 2024. We're not sure exactly what's going on when it comes to Joe Gibbs Racing. I could see him going over to work with Chandler Smith or Sheldon Creed, though I do think Jeff Stankiewicz is going to be working with Sheldon Creed at Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024 next year. Nonetheless, it's disappointing to hear that Jason Burdett is no longer going to be working with this team in 2024, but it doesn't really surprise me or shock me at this particular moment. So, like I said, disappointing to hear, but again, not really shocking and not surprising to see that Jason Burdett will not be working as a crew chief anymore in the 2024 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. It's a shame he's not returning, but it's not a surprise or a shock. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. As there was an article that got put out by Jenna Fryer yesterday talking about Bubba Wallace, and he spoke on the struggles with Ryan Blaney winning the NASCAR Cup Series Championship. Now, Bubba Wallace and Ryan Blaney are best buddies. If you've seen them around, they've been really good friends for a very, very long time, since back when they were kids, racing against each other in Legends cars, among other forms of racing. But Bubba basically said he went into a corner and hid for a little bit. But then Ryan Blaney and him talked a few days later, and Ryan said he kind of felt the way Bubba is feeling when Chase won the championship, kind of felt that jealousy. Now, I want to say one thing about Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace had a very, very good season in 2023. He didn't win a race, but Bubba Wallace had 5 top 5s and 10 top 10s, and for the first time in his NASCAR Cup Series career, he finished in the top 10 in points. Now, that could be a ceiling in his career, but I really don't think that is Bubba Wallace's ceiling. I think his ceiling is being an outside championship threatening contender and getting multiple victories and multiple wins. And I get Bubba Wallace is disappointed with how the season ended, but he seems calm now, and he's ready for 2024 and for this organization to get better. And every year since 2021, since joining 23XI Racing, Bubba Wallace has gotten better. Again, like I said, he did not win a race in 2023, but let's be honest, he should have won a few races. That Texas race got away from him. He probably had one of the best cars in the field in that race. He honestly probably should have been in contention to win some of those Talladega races. He probably should have won the Spring Talladega race. He probably should have won or contended for the win at Kansas in the playoffs. I think Bubba Wallace in general should be proud of how the season went. And he seemed proud later during the award ceremonies. He seemed a lot prouder. But I understand Bubba Wallace being disappointed with how the year kind of went. And I think he wants to be better as a driver. And I think he will have a better year in 2023. And Bubba Wallace, I love how open he is and how he speaks. And he's someone who I've grown to have a lot of respect for over the years. I've been a fan of his for a very long time. And I think he is overall, in general, going to have a better year in 2024 than he had in 2023. So I'm excited to see what he can do next year, and I'm looking forward to see Bubba Wallace competing once again to try to win another championship, or contend for his first championship, I should say, in 2024. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Elliott. Now, Bob Poggins put out a tweet yesterday and reports that Chase Elliott says he is on schedule for next year to have recovered from off-season shoulder surgery. Now, there's another driver we're going to talk about here who has shoulder surgery in just a little bit. We're kind of a little bit skeptical on maybe missing the Clash. But Chase Elliott, it's good to hear. His surgery came, I think, in the first week of the offseason or second week of the offseason. So he's on track to have his shoulder surgery basically done and ready to go. And Chase Elliott if he was running with a shoulder injury and he still did what he did, I think that shows how good of a year he had even with the issues. Chase Elliott, despite not winning a race and making the playoffs and missing part of the year, Chase Elliott has 7 top 5s and 13 top 10s and a 13th place average finish. And if you put all those numbers in with every other driver this year and had ran all 36 races instead of missing, he would have had like 10 top 5 finishes and probably around like 20 or 22 or 23 top 10s throughout the whole entire year, which would have been a championship threat season and would have still had like a 13, 14 place average finish with that. Chase Elliott, I think, is going to be much better in 2024 than he was in 2023. I expect this to be a pretty good year overall. Again, I'm excited to see what Chase Elliott can do in the 2024 season. I expect this to be a massive and pretty big bounce back year for this organization and team next season. Like I said, I think he's going to be a contender. I think he's going to be contending for wins throughout 2024. And like I said, I'm excited to see what he can do next year. I think he's going to get a bunch of wins. He's going to win some road course races. He's going to be a championship threat and contender. And I'm extremely excited and pumped up to see that Chase Elliott feels like he's ready to go. I can't wait to see what he can do next year. I'm excited about it. And nonetheless, very happy and glad to see a Chase Elliott without spoken and talking about this. And we'll see how Chase Elliott does in the 2024 NASCAR season. We'll see how things go for him in 2024. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brazil. As there was reported by Adam Stern on Tuesday that Brazil has been added to the list of places that NASCAR is considering for an International Cup Series race after TV ratings for Cup rose there this year following the introduction of a regional league. This does not surprise me. A lot of YouTubers, I think, have mentioned this in the past, but one of the biggest areas we've seen growth in YouTube for NASCAR has been the Brazilian audience. Obviously, NASCAR has been growing their presence in Brazil, and they've got stock car racing down there in Brazil, and it's been extremely successful. And it doesn't surprise me to see that there's a lot of interest for NASCAR to potentially come to Brazil. Now, if NASCAR does in fact come to Brazil, where would they go? Well, I think it's pretty simple where they would head, and that would be the Interlagos Raceway, which is in Sao Paulo. Interlagos has hosted Formula One races for a very, very long time, and the racing generally is solid. I thought the F1 race this year at Interlagos in the Sao Paulo GP overall was a solid race. And I think the race in NASCAR, while yes, the next-gen cars had its issues racing on road courses, and I think NASCAR is going to try to work to make that better, which I think the easiest way for them to make it better is to give more horsepower in these cars. I think that overall, when you look at Brazil, it doesn't surprise or shock me to see that Brazil is on the top priority of list of going international. Now, NASCAR, I think, is going to start by going to Canada first and even Mexico. I think that's where they're going to start internationally. I think you're looking at maybe going to Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, which they were talking about going there in 2024. I know NASCAR has continued to have conversations about maybe going there in 2025 as well. And we may also see NASCAR go to Mexico in the 2025 season as well. That certainly is a massive and pretty big possibility. But going to Brazil would be really, really interesting. Again, only major motorsport that goes there right now is Formula One. IndyCar used to go there, and they haven't gone there, I think, since like the early 2010s. They race in Sao Paulo. They race in, I think, Rio de Janeiro, a couple other places there as well. They've raced also in Argentina. And again, I think there's other areas like NASCAR, I think, would love to go to France. They'd love to go to England, race over there. But Brazil, being a top audience for NASCAR, I think has put a massive priority. And you may be able to get drivers like, let's say, Helio Castroneves, or even Tony Kanaan coming in. In fact, I remember last year talking about this. I think Tony Kanaan expressed interest and maybe wanted to run a few NASCAR Xfinity Series races for Junior Motorsports. Or racing for Junior Motorsports, or racing for a team in NASCAR. He had shown some interest after racing in Stock Car Brazil. So overall, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to NASCAR and potentially going to Brazil. I think it's exciting. There's a lot of talk about it. I would love to see NASCAR go to Brazil, and we'll see, in fact, if NASCAR does end up going to Brazil in the future. I think there is a chance and possibility that that may end up happening here in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daytona 500 entries. Now, we are going to talk about Stage 60 here in just a little bit with them running the Daytona 500. But Bob Barker's put out a tweet in regards to some potential Daytona 500 entries that are going to show up. He notes that Jimmy Johnson is likely going to run the Daytona 500 in 2024. A lot of speculation right now is that Jimmy Johnson is going to run around 6 to 10 NASCAR Cup Series races in 2024, and it's expected he'll run the Daytona 500 as well, though that has not been confirmed at this point. He also notes that Beer Motorsports, the Money Team, and NY Racing are also working on running the Daytona 500 as well. Beer Motorsports does not shock me or surprise me if they're looking to run the Daytona 500, considering Beer Motorsports, it ran a lot more races here than normal. They ran, I think, 6 races in 2023. I think if they're going to run more, it wouldn't surprise me if they run like 10 to 12 races into the future. Money Team surprised me a little bit, but again, once we got that Joseph Strigler report, it doesn't completely shock me. I look at who could drive that 50 car. I think maybe a guy like Matt DiBenedetto could end up driving for this team. Maybe we see Julio Castroneves get that opportunity to run the Indy 500, or maybe someone else we don't know at this point may end up running it. And then you think about NY Racing. That's a team that we all thought was gone. It sounds like they're in talks about coming back. I would imagine maybe someone like a Greg Biffle perhaps could drive that car, or somebody we're not thinking about at this point could come back and drive it. Now, it's still to be determined on the other rides that could come into play. We will talk about the 60 car running. We know that BJ McLeod's going to run the Daytona 500. We also know that we're going to have the 60 car with David Reagan running as well. But there are some teams that I think we need to talk about. Kaulig Racing. Kaulig Racing ran a third car in the Daytona 500 in 2023 with Chandler Smith. Well, I think they failed to make the show, unfortunately. But I think that they're going to potentially run the Daytona 500 with maybe AJ Allmendinger, because it's expected the title is going to take over the 6th team. 2311 Racing, they're probably going to run a third car in the 500. They ran it with Travis Pastrana. I think you got to look at a driver like Carl Edwards. Maybe somehow he comes out of retirement into the future. Someone like a Chandler Smith or Sheldon Creed more than likely being the favorite to drive that car. And then Trackhouse Racing with Shane Van Gisbergen. That's another team that I think about, because Shane Van Gisbergen, will he be ready with, will the one oval start he did get, will that give him an opportunity to run the Daytona 500? That is definitely a big question for sure. There's some other teams that didn't talk about here. RCR maybe giving a ride like Austin Miller, Brody Kostecki perhaps. I think that is a potential possibility, and we'll see what happens in regards to that. Nonetheless, so it's interesting to hear some potential Daytona 500 entries that may show up for the Daytona 500, and we'll see what happens in regards to the 2024 Daytona 500. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ryan Blaney. Now, before we talk about Ryan Blaney said, Roger Penske was asked about Ryan Blaney potentially running the Indy 500, because Ryan Blaney in the past has expressed interest in wanting to run the Indy 500. Roger said as of now that is not in the cards and not in the plans for Ryan Blaney at this particular moment, and that is not the focus. Well, Ryan Blaney went and spoke to the media after I think Bob had asked Roger Penske, and Ryan says that he would love to run the Indy 500, and he's going to have to talk to Roger about doing it. Now, Roger continued on by basically saying that Kyle Larson coming and running the Indy 500 is going to have a massive and huge impact. Now, Ryan Blaney is someone who I think would be really good to run the Indy 500, someone who I didn't think completely about. Now, would Ryan Blaney be extremely successful if he ran the Indy 500? Honestly, I don't really know, to be honest, because Ryan Blaney doesn't have as much open wheel experience as a driver like Kyle Larson does, who I think is going to be a threat and contender to win the Indy 500. He was pretty good in the test, if I remember correctly, in his rookie orientation test. I think it was the fastest of the 4 or 5 guys that did the rookie orientation test, and he's going to be with a team that is going to be really capable of winning the Indy 500. Aaron McLaren was the fastest organization, Indy 500. They could have won the race with Felix Rosenqvist, who of course will be a Meyer-Shank Racing, and then he could have won with Pato O'Ward, who I think have one of the fastest cars over the week as well. And Alexander Rossi was another driver who was extremely strong. And you got David Malukas, who is a really solid oval racer, who is coming to that organization and team in 2024. So I think there is a lot of excitement in the air and potential possibilities in regards to this. But going back to Ryan Blaney, obviously if he's going to run the Indy 500, it will be with Team Penske. And right now, Penske, the issue for Blaney to go is they only are planning to run 3 cars long term, and their 3 rides are filled up. You've got Scott McLaughlin in the 3 car, who's been really good the last few years. You've got Joseph Newgarden, who just won the Indy 500, and of course is a 2-time IndyCar champion. And then you've got other guys that drive for the organization and team, and it's just their focus right now on making their organization a lot better. And Will Power as well, of course, who is an Indy 500 winner. And Will Power is not retiring anytime soon. Hell, Will Power just signed a multi-year contract extension not that long ago. So I think when you look at Ryan Blaney's chance to run Indy 500, I think at least at the moment they're kind of slim. But I think a lot of us fans would love to see Ryan Blaney run the Indy 500. I think it'd be really fun to have him. I think he would absolutely push the sport for sure and grow NASCAR and IndyCar in a massive, massive way. So I really hope in the future we do get to see Ryan Blaney, maybe sooner rather than later, run the Indy 500. I just think right now at this moment that is not on the table, at least for 2024. Maybe 2025 it happens. It's something that could be something to talk about throughout the silly season, but right now at this particular moment and point, it is not going to happen. So we'll see what happens, but as of now, Ryan Blaney will not run the Indy 500, at least for the foreseeable future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Denny Hamlin. Now, Denny Hamlin spoke to the media before the awards ceremony happened, and he says that his surgery he got before Thanksgiving was a little more intense than expected, and he could potentially miss the 2024 Busch Clash at the LA Coliseum. This is really interesting. For those, like I just said a second ago, Denny Hamlin had shoulder surgery before Thanksgiving took place, I think on Wednesday before Thanksgiving had happened, and he basically said the surgery was a little more intense. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, how could Denny Hamlin miss the Clash? Isn't the Clash like 80 or 81 days away? The Clash is 65 days away from today. That is just a little over 2 months away. So if Denny Hamlin was to end up missing the Clash, it would not surprise or shock me. And it's not really, again, I don't think Denny Hamlin 100% is required to run, especially if he has a substitute driver coming in to race that car. He would basically be allowed to do that. Now, the big question we all have is who potentially could be Denny Hamlin's substitute if he does, in fact, end up missing a Clash. I think there's only 2 drivers in particular that I think could end up driving his car. The first one being Chandler Smith. While it's not been officially announced, it's expected that Chandler Smith more than likely will be joining Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024 with Joe Gibbs Racing. Chandler Smith is someone who has made also a couple select NASCAR Cup Series starts with Call of Racing, of course. I would imagine that Chandler Smith would definitely be the front runner for sure to drive that 11 car if Denny was to miss. The other driver would be Sheldon Creed. Sheldon Creed currently drives the number, was expected to join Joe Gibbs Racing, very similar to Chandler Smith, expected to join Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024. And he's someone who has only made 1 Cup start in the number 78 car for Live Fast Motorsports when they drove with Chevy at the time, of course. I would imagine that he also would be a front runner to take over that seat. It'd be crazy if they get someone like a Carl Edwards and maybe drive for Joe Gibbs Racing again, but that's probably not going to happen at this particular moment. But when I think about this for Denny Hamlin's had a lot of injuries throughout his career. Now, unlike some of the certain injuries Denny Hamlin's had throughout his career, this apparently was a genetic situation, according to what Denny Hamlin said, where I think he said the bone grew a bigger size or something I haven't heard of in a very, very long time, which is absolutely wild and crazy thing that this is something that's off the racetrack that's affected Denny Hamlin. Now, I do think Denny Hamlin, of course, will be more ready for the Daytona 500. Daytona 500 is 79 days away. We got to think about the long-term effects. Will Denny Hamlin be ready for the Daytona 500, and will he miss more races than just the Clash if he does, in fact, miss the Clash? Now, I hope Denny Hamlin can be ready for a few months down the road and can be ready for the Clash, but if not, I think Joe Gibbs Racing will be prepared and ready to go. But let's hope that they don't have to make that decision and Denny Hamlin, in fact, can end up racing in the Clash in 2024. Denny Hamlin's won a couple Clash races, of course, at Daytona, and I think Denny Hamlin would like to go and try to win a Clash race in the LA Coliseum. Denny Hamlin has embraced that, and 2011 Racing Course has embraced it themselves. They made some changes with the logo, among other things, and rebranding situations. So I really hope and pray that Denny Hamlin is ready to go and can, in fact, be ready to show up to the racetrack and be ready to go for that. If not, though, I'd imagine Chandler Smith and Sheldon Creed will be on standby to potentially drive behind the wheel of this. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Noah Grayson. Now, Noah Grayson, of course, will be racing in the Snowball Derby this Sunday, but he's actually speaking to Matt Weaver over the weekend and kind of spoke about the process of making a return to racing and kind of spoke about what happened about 2 months ago as well. Noah Grayson says that he was uneducated on the way he handled the situation. He also has said that he is working with a sports psychologist for the first time in his career to help him out quite a bit. When you read the article, there's a lot of interesting things that came out. Kind of said he was uneducated, how things kind of worked out, and also the mistakes he made as well. Now, one thing that was not mentioned in that article that Matt Weaver put out is that Noah Grayson did not reveal what he's doing for 2024, as he's focused, of course, trying to win the Snowball Derby, which he has already won the Snowball Derby past. I think he won it back in 2017 or 2018, which caused a lot of controversy then. But when I think of what happened with Noah Grayson a few months ago, I think everything got blown way out of proportion. One, I don't think NASCAR should have suspended Noah Grayson for what ended up happening. If I said that, I will correct myself on that. I don't think Noah Grayson should have been suspended by NASCAR. If the team wanted to do it themselves, that's their choice. But the fact that Noah Grayson, because in my honest opinion, I'll just be real on this, I do believe that Legacy Motor Club was looking for an excuse to get Noah Grayson out of the organization. When we talked about what happened, they looked for any way for Noah Grayson to be let go of the organization. I know Jimmy has had conversations with Noah, but of course, that kind of went down with everything that kind of went into place. And when you think of what happened with Noah Grayson, like I said, I feel like that Noah Grayson got a little bit screwed over because of everything that kind of ended up happening. Now, in regards to Noah Grayson's future, it is anticipated and expected that Noah Grayson more than likely is going to end up driving for Stewart-Haas Racing in the number 10 car in 2024. We already know that Eric Almirola, of course, is not going to be racing full-time in Cup in 2024. In fact, I don't think Eric Almirola is going to be racing in Cup at all next year. And Noah Grayson does bring some sponsorship and funding with him. He brings companies like Black Rifle Coffee, and I believe Bass Pro Shops is also still going to be working with him. I would imagine Wendy's as well is going to work with Noah Grayson as well in 2024. As for what I think Noah Grayson will do in 2024 with Stewart-Haas Racing, which will probably get announced in the not-so-distant future, I do expect Noah Grayson to struggle a little bit. I'm just going to be honest. His first year at Legacy Motor Club, he did not run well. Noah Grayson, in 21 races with the organization, only scored 2 top 20 finishes, and I think failed to score a single top 10, which I think only Ty Dillon did not score top 10. I think he's one of only 2 drivers who failed to score top 10 that ran a majority of the Cup season this year. Even J.J. Elliott got a top 10, I think, in 2023, and that says something when the Rick Ware cars are doing a lot better. Again, I think this is going to be a better situation for Noah, but I still think there's going to be some struggles coming away because Stewart-Haas Racing also is an organization. They have been struggling. Nonetheless, I'm glad to see Noah Grayson has kind of cleaned up his act, and I'm glad to see Noah Grayson is doing a lot better. I hope he's doing the best right now, and I hope we can see him back behind the wheel of a Cup car, which sounds like hopefully sooner rather than later he'll get behind the wheel. Hopefully the SHR announcement happen before Christmas at this point, but I'm glad to see Noah Grayson is working with a sports psychologist to try to help him out going into 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about RFK Racing. Now, we talked about RFK Racing on this channel, I believe it was Tuesday, and we all originally thought that RFK Racing was going to be returning to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024. Well, they are bringing a legendary number back that was ran in the Xfinity Series, which is the most successful number in RFK Racing's history when, of course, they were Roush, but they are not returning to the NASCAR Xfinity Series, at least as of now for 2024. Instead, they're going to run a third car in the Daytona 500, and the number once again will be number 60. And the driver who will be driving that number 60 car in the Daytona 500, which a lot of people thought would be like Carl Edwards, Julio Castroneves, even Frankie Muniz, have been mentioned as potential possibilities. But the driver is going to be David Ragan. David Ragan has a history, of course, with RFK and Roush Fenway Racing. David Ragan, of course, did run with RFK for many, many years. In 2006, ran with them in the Xfinity Series part-time in the 06 season. And, of course, ran full-time with them from 2007 to 2011. He nearly made the playoffs in 2008 with the team and also won a race in 2011 at Daytona and could have swept both Daytona races had he not changed lanes on the restart. Now, David Ragan, like I said, is also a very strong and a really good super speedway racer. David Ragan has won 2 super speed races in NASCAR Cup Series career, but also in the Xfinity Series, David Ragan won a race at Talladega and Bristol as well. Now, I think a lot of people wanted, like I said, a driver like Carl Edwards to come in and race, and trust me, it would have been cool to see Carl Edwards come back and drive with RFK, but let's be realistic here. David Ragan is a better option and choice, especially when it comes to super speedway racing, and let's be honest, it's a super speedway race, and I don't see Carl Edwards going back to RFK if he's even going to return. I don't see him going to a team like RFK Racing. Now, according to what we know, this car could run more races in 2024 with multiple different drivers. We could see him run some road course races. Brad kind of talked about how the Daytona 500 was the easiest race that this team could end up running. So if they do run some additional races, what drivers could they get? Well, if you look at the road course program, they could get someone like, I don't know, Mike Rockenfeller. Mike Rockenfeller has some experience in the next-gen car, and I believe he's going to be running with the Mustang GT3 team in IMSA next year. So Mike Rockenfeller is someone that I would keep your eyes on who could drive this car. I also could see Joey Hand. Joey Hand has some experience in the NASCAR Cup Series, and I could see Joey Hand getting a chance and opportunity, and maybe even to get someone like Jenson Button who drove for RFK Racing. And this could also be an opportunity for some drivers that haven't had a chance and opportunity to race that could drive a 60 car. Like maybe Riley Hurts, Cole Custer getting an opportunity chance. And maybe this could be an opportunity for a driver like Hailie Deegan to get her first ever NASCAR Cup Series start. Considering the fact that Hailie Deegan is someone who I think could make a Cup start this year in 2024. It's certainly possibly a chance. It's something to keep your eyes out on. Nonetheless, it's really cool to see that RFK is bringing it in. And again, I think a lot of people wanted someone like a Julio Castroneves, and I think they could still get someone like a Julio Castroneves to drive in the Daytona 500. But when you look at the realistically of bringing something like the Sage 60 in, I think it makes a lot of sense for RFK. And again, do I think long-term we're going to see RFK return to the Xfinity Series? I think that certainly is a possibility that we could see a team like RFK return to the Xfinity Series in the future. Brad has kind of talked about that could be certainly a possibility. But as of now, right now, it doesn't surprise or shock me right now at this moment that RFK is returning to the Xfinity Series full-time. Obviously, you got Ford, who's focused on right now on the Truck Series a lot more than the Xfinity Series right now. Though I think RFK coming back to Xfinity would be extremely successful. And if they were ever to return in the future, they could bring someone like a Matt DiBenedetto in, a Frankie Muniz perhaps, because Frankie's kind of been rumored some organizations, which has been kind of true and not true in certain instances. It's something very interesting to see how things play out. It'd be cool to see a team like RFK, though, return to Xfinity. Nonetheless, it's really cool to see that we're going to be seeing the 60 car back on track in the NASCAR Cup Series. And it's another Daytona 500 entry, which I think is really good for the sport when you have more entries showing up than cars allowed to run, because it's going to make Daytona 500 entry. We know that 38 cars are going to be there, and there's potentially even more that are going to show up than we originally thought. So nonetheless, it's exciting to see and glad to see that RFK Racing will in fact have a third car for the Daytona 500 in 2024. I'm excited about it. I think this car will run in more different races in 2024, but we'll see what drivers they end up getting in 2024. And again, it's another entry for the Daytona 500 in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about the new media rights deal. Now, I did a video talking about this on the channel on Tuesday, or actually Wednesday, excuse me. But I want to talk a little more about the media rights deals. There's some things that I did not reveal. Now, NASCAR, like I said, finally revealed the deal on Wednesday. It is going to be from 2025 to 2031. It is going to be $7.7 billion. So annually, for every single year, it'll be $1.1 billion every year. That is a 40% increase from the current TV deal that goes from 2015 to 2024, which is $820 million a year. So that is a 40% increase from the previous year. The biggest additions for 2025 is that TNT and Amazon are going to be joining in 2024. So here are things going to play out in 2025. Fox is going to carry the first 14 races of 2025. 5 will be on main Fox network, including the Clash in Daytona 500 and the All-Star race, and 9 of those races will be on Fox Sports 1. After that, Amazon is going to carry the next 5 races in 2025. Then TNT and HBO Max will carry the next 5 races. And then NBC will carry the final 14 races of 2025. 4 will be on NBC and 10 are going to be on USA. Now, the first half of the season with practice qualifying is going to be on Prime. So you're going to have a Prime subscription if you're going to want to tune into practice and qualifying. The only exception is the All-Star race, the Daytona 500, and the Busch Clash. All those will be likely on FS1 in 2025. The second half of the year practice qualifying will be on True TV and HBO Max as well. Now, some other big notes is that the Truck Series is going to remain on FS1 for the next 7 years, and Xfinity, of course, will move to the CW. But a big thing that I haven't seen a ton of people talk about, only a few people have seen talk about, is that Bleacher Report, which of course is owned by HBO Max and basically a couple, and Warner Brothers as well, they're going to be reporting on the House of Highlights. House of Highlights has helped a lot of sports grow, especially the NBA here in the United States. And the Bleacher Report has 16 million followers on Twitter. NASCAR, we all know, has struggled massively on social media. The fact that they're going to be reporting and working in 2025, maybe even sooner, before that, maybe the end of 2024, working on getting social media performance working in the sport, I think is absolutely huge and great for the sport in general. Now, looking at some of the other things to note, like I said, the Truck Series going back on FS1 till 2020, 2031. They better get their coverage better. The truck broadcasts have been abysmal, and Fox better do a much better job. NASCAR has even called for Fox to do a lot better if they're going to want to keep them past 2031. There's also a lot of positives to this as well. Other big thing, something we'll talk about that is the one thing I haven't seen a lot of talk about in a second, but one of the biggest cool things is Amazon and TNT coming into the sport. TNT, of course, had worked with NASCAR for many years with Turner Broadcast System, which goes all the way back to, I think, 1979 or basically the 1980s. And, of course, they left after 2014 when TNT left. A big question I have is who are going to be some of these broadcast partners as well. It's another thing is there's going to be some media silly season. Will some of the people from Fox and NBC move over to work with a couple other of these companies? I would love to see Alan Bestwick come back and work with either Amazon or TNT. Alan Bestwick is one of the best commentators out there in sports in general, and I think Alan Bestwick would do an amazing and great job covering NASCAR. He did an amazing job covering the SRX, so I think he would do a phenomenal and incredible job if he came back and covered for TNT and Amazon, or maybe he could do both. I would imagine that Dale Jr. is going to be a lot more involved, and I think Jr. probably will work with multiple different media companies, kind of like what Ned Jarrett used to do back in the day, where Ned Jarrett worked with CBS and also ESPN. I'd imagine Dale Jr. will be involved with one of those other companies. I'd also imagine that there's a couple other people going to be involved. Wally Downback Jr., him coming back in, would be absolutely awesome and incredible. And I think there's some other people, like Matt Yoakum could be someone to keep your eyes on. He's been working with NBC with their IMSO coverage, so I'd imagine he's probably a front runner. And it'd be really cool if we saw someone like Lee Diffie perhaps come back in and work. But I also think in 2025, Adam Alexander more than likely will probably take over, considering that Mike Joy will be 76 by the start of 2025. I'd imagine there's a good chance, a possibility, that we're going to see him take over for Mike Joy in the not-so-distant future. So that's something to think about as well with that. Again, I think a massive positive when it comes to the TV deal is that there's going to be more money coming into play for the teams. This also will start with the charter negotiations and get those charter negotiations back up and running to where we can finally get the charter agreement done. Now, another big positive to me is that one thing that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about is that Amazon Prime owns Twitch. If I'm not mistaken, they stream the Thursday Night Football games on Twitch. Because, like I said, Amazon owns Twitch. So I'd have to imagine that they will stream the NASCAR Cup Series race on Twitch. You may not have to buy a subscription to Amazon to watch. Now, maybe you will have to, but if they're going to stream it on Twitch, you may not have to miss a race at all, and you may be able to save your money quite a bit. Now, again, if you want to watch practice qualify, more than likely, you're going to have to buy a subscription because I don't think they're going to stream that on Twitch. But I think that's a massive positive for the sport right there, which has a lot of younger fans and a younger demographic as well, who does end up watching. Now, here's where the biggest negatives come into play for me, is the races on cable. Look, I understand that cable has a big presence still. However, cable is dying rapidly. I believe this year alone, 4 to 5 million people have cut their cable subscriptions. A lot of people have gone to YouTube TV, which I wouldn't even count YouTube TV as cable. More people are going to YouTube TV because it is cheaper. But only having 5 races on Fox and 9 on FS1, that is less race on broadcast, and that's less chance to go to your sport. Same with NBC. The more races on USA isn't great, considering USA has lost a lot of their viewership base as well. And I think it will hurt TV ratings, at least in the short term. Now, long term, I think the sport will grow, especially with the Amazon stuff, especially attracting that younger demographic in that younger audience. I do believe it will help the sport grow overall. Again, I think there's a lot of positive when it does come to the new media rights deal. Again, I think the Xfinity Series, of course, going to the CW is absolutely huge. Again, I think a big thing to think about that when it comes to this TV deal is that it's about the money. NASCAR was looking for more money to bring to the teams. And that's a huge thing because the more money you get to these teams, the better it's going to be. But I think for some people, it is also going to be confusing where you're going to have to move through a lot of different broadcasters to find what you're wanting to watch. You'll have to go through True TV part way. There's 9 or 10 different broadcast groups you're going to have to work with. And I think for some people, it's definitely confusing. But at least for most of the way, it's all in a row. It's not like back in the 1990s where you had 1 week you're on ESPN, the next week you're on CBS, the next week you're on TNN, the next week you're on TBS. You would have to go through all four of those broadcasters, and it hurt the sport's growth quite a bit. They're kind of getting back to that process a little bit back to the 1990s. But again, I think NASCAR tried to negotiate to try to bring more money to the teams. And I think in general, a lot of people are going to say, well, why is NASCAR going to Amazon? Well, a big reason why they're going to Amazon is because more money. Again, need more money for the teams, and streaming is becoming extremely more prevalent here in the U.S. I think Amazon has 130 to 140 million subscriptions right now, and that number is expected to go up in the next few years. Probably around 170 million people are probably going to have that by the end of 2025. And I think a lot of people are going to that because it's only $12.99 a month. I know it's a lot for people who have cable as well, but it's cheaper to get an Amazon Prime subscription right now than it is to get a cable subscription, especially cheaper to get than a YouTube TV subscription, where I pay $73 a month for a YouTube TV subscription. So you pay a lot more money for that. So overall, I think bringing Amazon in is actually extremely good for the sport. It will hurt for the older fans because NASCAR fans are a creature of habit. But still, I think there's a lot of positive that did come out of this TV deal for sure. There's some negative for sure. But overall, I think there's a lot of good things. And I expect a lot of promotion from all these companies as well. And I think they'll work together a lot better for sure going into 2024. So, that is it for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, as for my Patreon as well. Links below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. What are your thoughts about the new media rights deal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about RFK expanding to a third part-time entry in 2024? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, more than likely, we'll be talking about 10 drivers who should return to NASCAR in the future. There could be a silly season video dropping over the weekend. There might also be a bold predictions dropping over the weekend as well. And also likely early in the week, we'll have the RFK preview dropping on the channel as well. Got a lot of great content dropping on the channel that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.